Tehran is a city used to extremes traffic that never seems to end. Summers that burn the pavements, winters that creep in through concrete walls. But in recent months, another extreme has quietly taken hold of daily life. The fear that one day the taps might simply stop running. On balconies, rooftops, and street corners, people raise their phones not to film protests or celebrations, but to capture something far more intimate. They record the sound of sputtering pipes, the sight of children filling plastic bottles from a trickling public fountain, the long queues forming next to tanker trucks. In the words of one report that has come to define this moment, Tehran residents film their daily lives as Iran faces devastating drought. What is unfolding in the Iranian capital is not just a dry spell or a difficult season. It is, by almost every serious assessment, the worst water crisis the country has seen in decades, and it is hitting Tehran in a way that was once unthinkable. Iran has gone through at least 6 consecutive years of drought, with experts warning that around 70% of the country's groundwater has been depleted after decades of overuse. This year, the crisis crossed a psychological line. Tehran, home to parliament, ministries, the business elite, and many of the country's power brokers, is now being described as a city edging toward day zero, the point at which water systems can no longer reliably supply residents. In some neighborhoods, nightly water cuts have already become routine. The numbers behind the scenes are stark. The dams and reservoirs that feed the capital are at a fraction of their usual levels. In recent weeks, satellite imagery has shown some of the major reservoirs around Tehran at dangerously low capacity, confirming what residents already feel in their bathrooms and kitchens. Analysis by international and regional experts indicates that some of the key dams serving the capital are operating at around 10 to 11% of capacity, and in parts of the country, reserves are even lower. At the same time, the rainy season has failed to arrive in any meaningful way. In what should be the wettest part of the year, Tehran has seen almost no rain. One recent assessment noted that over a period of more than 50 days into the rainy season, barely a millimetre of rain had fallen over the capital, a once-in-a-century pattern that has turned concern into alarm. On the streets, those statistics are translated into everyday improvisation. Families who can afford it have installed small rooftop tanks and pressure pumps, trying to store every drop that does reach their pipes. Shopkeepers keep buckets and jerry cans in the back of their stores. In older apartment buildings, neighbours coordinate by messaging apps. "Water is back, fill everything now," one resident might write to the building group in the early hours of the morning. For younger Iranians, especially in Tehran's dense apartment blocks, the camera has become a way to document this new normal. Videos circulate of children brushing their teeth over basins instead of sinks, of parents saving the grey water from washing dishes to flush toilets, of elderly people standing in line at public taps with worn plastic containers. Clips show faucets opening to nothing more than a dry hiss, followed by a quiet pause, and then the soft sound of someone laughing in disbelief. Behind these intimate scenes lies a story that is both local and national. Tehran's crisis is the sharpest edge of a problem that has been building across Iran for years. Too little rain, too much heat, and too many demands on a shrinking water system. Experts point out that Iran spends close to 90% of its water on agriculture, much of it low yield and poorly irrigated, in an effort to maintain food self-sufficiency. That choice, once seen as strategic, now looks dangerously costly. On paper, the country still has a substantial network of dams, canals and reservoirs. But in practice, decades of over-extraction, ill-planned mega-projects and political favoritism in water allocation have pushed many regions into what some specialists now call water bankruptcy, the point at which natural reserves cannot be replenished fast enough to meet demand. The consequences can even be seen from space. Recent satellite imagery released by researchers and think tanks shows Iran's once mighty lakes and reservoirs shrinking into pale outlines of their former selves. Lake Urmia in the northwest, once the Middle East's largest saltwater lake, has repeatedly receded to a fraction of its former size. Reservoirs around Tehran and other major cities have retreated, their exposed banks forming pale rings that mark each season's losses. Inside Iran, the political stakes are rising. The country is now led by President Masoud Pezeshkian, a reformist politician and former heart surgeon who took office in July 2024 after the death of his predecessor in a helicopter crash. He inherited not only a troubled economy and ongoing tensions with the West, but also a water system already under severe strain. In recent weeks, Pezeshkian has spoken in unusually stark terms about the severity of the drought. He has warned publicly that if rain does not come and consumption is not cut, Tehran may face the unimaginable, a partial or temporary evacuation of the capital. The very idea moving millions of people out of a city that has been Iran's political and economic heart for decades would have sounded absurd a few years ago. Today, it is discussed as a last resort scenario in policy circles and on late-night talk shows alike. For ordinary residents, however, the conversation is much more practical. A shop worker in the south of the city might talk about how often the taps go dry after midnight and how much extra she now pays for bottled water for her children. A taxi driver may joke darkly that one day he will charge more for a bottle of cold water than for a ride across town. A university student scrolling through social media sees videos of cracked riverbeds, dry fountains and storage tanks on balconies, alongside old photos of Tehran's greener years. In some neighborhoods, local mosques have been organizing special prayers for rain, echoing religious traditions that stretch back centuries. State media has shown images of worshippers standing in open spaces, hands raised to the sky. At the same time, environmentalists and climate scientists inside and outside Iran have warned that prayer alone will not reverse decades of mismanagement and the effects of a warming planet. The struggle over narrative is as real as the struggle over water. Some clerics and officials have suggested that the drought is a test or punishment linked to social and cultural issues. Others, including many experts, emphasize that the roots of the crisis are largely man-made, overbuilding dams on already stressed rivers, allowing illegal wells to multiply, and encouraging thirsty crops like wheat and pistachios in areas that cannot sustain them. What is different now is that Tehran itself is clearly exposed. For years, the capital was largely shielded from the worst water shortages by its priority access to national resources. Shortages that devastated villages, smaller cities, and farming communities did not always register in the lives of Tehran's middle class. That distance is gone. Temperatures in the capital have repeatedly climbed above 40 degrees Celsius, while some other parts of Iran have seen readings above 50 degrees. In that heat, even a few hours without running water feels brutal. When outages stretch into the night, families rearrange their routines, showering before the cuts begin, cooking earlier in the evening, and storing water in every available container, just in case. For video makers and ordinary citizens alike, this has become emotional material. Clips show women pouring a kettle's last warm water over a sink full of dishes, then carefully capturing the leftovers in a bowl. Others show men examining cracks in the walls of older buildings, worried about land subsidence caused by years of groundwater extraction. In some districts, the ground has sunk so noticeably that engineers warn of long-term damage to roads and infrastructure. Those who film these scenes are not necessarily activists. Many are simply trying to process what is happening around them. Posting a video of a dry faucet, a long queue, or a nearly empty reservoir becomes a way to make sense of a crisis that for years was discussed more in conferences and academic reports than in kitchens and stairwells. Yet the cameras also reflect something deeper, a mistrust in official messaging. Iranians have lived through many crises, economic sanctions, political unrest, and battles over personal freedoms, and many have grown skeptical of state narratives. When officials blame sanctions, climate change, or foreign conspiracies for the water crisis, residents who have watched green spaces disappear and rivers shrink over decades often feel that a crucial part of the story is being left out. At the same time, the government faces a dilemma. Acknowledging the full scale of the crisis risks sparking panic or anger. Downplaying it risks leaving people unprepared. So far, the response has been a patchwork. Calls for voluntary consumption cuts, cloud seeding experiments designed to squeeze more rain from scarce clouds, and limited investments in infrastructure upgrades. But none of these measures can quickly refill empty reservoirs or restore decades of lost groundwater. In expert circles, discussion increasingly centers on structural change. Analysts have argued for drastic reforms in agriculture, switching to less water-intensive crops, modernizing irrigation, and abandoning some of the most wasteful projects. Others call for pricing reforms, suggesting that water tariffs must change to reflect scarcity while still protecting the poorest households. There are also proposals to decentralize population and industry, relocating some of Tehran's functions to other cities that still have relatively more stable water supplies. But reforms on paper are one thing. Implementing them in a politically tense environment is another. Cutting water to powerful interests or forcing large-scale changes in rural economies already suffering from unemployment and migration could provoke backlash. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking. Each rainless week that passes pushes Tehran and other cities closer to thresholds that engineers have long warned about. In the midst of this, life goes on. Parents still take their children to school, workers navigate the city's traffic-clogged roads, and young people continue to meet in cafes when they can, often joking grimly about the irony of sitting under bright lights in a city that cannot guarantee basic water. There are wedding parties, birthday celebrations, and small acts of joy, all of them now framed by the quiet knowledge that something is fundamentally out of balance. For many Iranians, the drought has become not just an environmental crisis, but a mirror reflecting deeper questions about governance, fairness, and the social contract. The promises made after the 1979 revolution, including affordable services and care for the most vulnerable, sound increasingly distant when people are told to use less water while watching large, well-connected farms and industries continue to operate as before. And so people film. They film the cracks on dried riverbeds and the greenish puddles at the bottom of nearly empty reservoirs. They film the tanker trucks making their way into parched neighborhoods at dawn and the faces of children waiting with plastic bottles in hand. They film the rain on the rare days when it comes, as if trying to capture proof that the sky has not abandoned them entirely. These videos do not solve the crisis, but they do something else. They create a shared record, a visual archive of how a great city and its people are coping with a slow-moving disaster. They carry the story beyond national borders, into the phones and feeds of people who may never have walked through Tehran's crowded streets but can recognize instantly the fear of a dry tap. In the months ahead, Iran's leaders will have to decide whether to treat this drought as a passing emergency or as the turning point that finally forces structural change. Climate models suggest that even if rainfall improves in some years, the long-term trend will remain challenging in a warming Middle East. Groundwater that has taken centuries to accumulate cannot be rebuilt in a decade. For Tehran's residents, the choice feels far more immediate. Every time water flows again after a nightly cut, there is a moment of relief, the sound of pipes filling, the rush of water into a sink or bucket, the small luxury of a cool shower. Every time the flow slows and stops, that relief is replaced by a familiar knot of anxiety. They may not have chosen to become chroniclers of a historic drought, but their phone cameras, pointed at kitchen sinks and city fountains instead of tourist landmarks and shopping malls, are now telling a story that the world cannot afford to ignore.